El Filibusterismo is the sequel to Rizal's Filipino classic Noli Me Tangere. It is set some 13 years after the events of the earlier book, and many of the figures from Noli figure in it. Noli is, of course, dominated by Juan Crisostomo Ibarra and his ideals for a better future for the Philippines, including fostering education as a means of improving the lot of the Filipinos. In both novels, the corruption of those in power, and especially the friars, representatives of the powerful Catholic Church, is repeatedly shown and attacked. At the beginning of the Il Feli, Ibarra is supposed to be long dead, and in his stead, Simon is introduced, a jewelry merchant whom little is known about. The wily merchant clearly has big ambitions, and quite possibly the means to accomplish them, though he plays his cards close to his vest. What Simon rages against is a sclerotic system in which a few wield great power and use it to hold the masses back. Education, which few have access to and which in practice turns out to be a beating or numbing into submission, and claims of moral authority in particular are among the ways the friars and the nation's elite maintain complete control. They even take pride in the fact that we're not like the English and the Dutch who, in order to maintain the people's submission, make use of the whip. We employ softer, more secure measures. The healthy influence of the friars is superior to the English whip. It makes for a largely docile, if frustrated population, with almost no one daring to voice even the slightest criticism, or admit to any thought that it is not in lockstep with those in power, as here any independent thought, any word that does not echo the will of the powerful is called Filibusterismo, and you know well what that means. It's madness for anyone to have the pleasure of saying what he thinks aloud because he's courting persecution. Simon is convinced now that open filibusterismo does not suffice. Stronger measures are called for, and he has the plans to overthrow the existing order and mindset. Yes, he has the grandest revolutionary visions. When the poor neighborhoods erupt in chaos, when my avengers sow discord in the streets, you long-time victims of greed and errancy, I will tear down the walls of your prison and release you from the claws of fanaticism, and then, white dove, you will become a phoenix to rise from its still glowing ashes. A revolution woven in the dim light of mystery has kept me from you. Another revolution will return me to your arms, bring me back to life, and that moon, before it reaches the height of its splendor, will light up the Philippines, cleansed of its repugnant rush. Twice the novel builds to a climax, to the promise of incredibly violent upheaval and explosion into revolution, only for the grand plans to implode. Rizal takes his characters to the brink of a violent overthrow of the existing order, and then draws back, returning to the historical Philippine reality. There are a variety of reasons for why the plans are not carried through as originally intended, but certainly Rizal's own message, as also expressed by characters in the book, is that violence is not the preferred solution, and that while change is necessary, it should come about peacefully and sensibly. So while the novel does not provide all the simplistic cathartic satisfactions of utopian revolutionary fiction in its realism, admitting to the near overwhelming might of the powers that be, it is a more quietly effective work of literature. El Feli is a social critical work with many chapters and scenes, set pieces that show just how corrupt and debased this society, and especially high society and the friars have become. Occasionally, Rizal is too specific in his prescriptions and moralizing. The case for education, and in particular for teaching Spanish, is a good one, but Rizal tries a bit too hard to weave that repeatedly into the narrative. But it's the stray stories, illustrative of excess and corruption, that ultimately prove most distracting. Some of these are very entertaining and some of the points both amusing and well made, but ultimately Simon is left in the shadows too much of the time. Almost too powerful a figure, it's understandable that Rizal did not constantly want him at the fore, but he's certainly the figure readers want to hear and see more from. Meanwhile, Rizal also isn't quite willing to allow other significant figures, such as Basilio, to take a more prominent place in the narrative either. While much of the social criticism here is specific to a time and place, enough is certainly universal. Rizal was also clearly well versed in the European fiction of the time, and El Feli is certainly comparable to, and often more entertaining than much of the social fiction coming out of Europe at the time. A passionate work verging sometimes on the melodramatic, El Feli is an entertaining document of its times and a fine novel. If Noli Me Tangere remains the best introduction to the modern Philippines, El Feli is nevertheless a worthwhile follow-up. This portrayal of Filipino life gives permanent interest to these books. The characters are taken from every branch of society, including the Spaniard noble ideals and the native of barbarous instincts. We are not sure that psychologically these people are very deeply or acutely drawn, but their exteriors at least are real and vivacious. If we do not carry away from among them any lasting friendships, we do gain a picture of life in the Philippines that is varied and complete. Generally, El Feli presents a gloomier depiction of the country under the Spanish regime. More radical and revolutionary, the novel has less idealism and romance than the Noli. The El Feli manifests Rizal's more mature and less hopeful attitude towards the social political situation in the country. The grimmer outlook and more tragic mood can be attributed to the persecutions and sufferings the author and his family experienced from the Spanish friars and officials in the years he was writing the novel. This seemed to prove that Rizal, though practically promoting the attainment of reforms peacefully, also advocated the idea of armed revolution under some conditions. Intelligent as he is, what Rizal would never subscribe to is the useless spilling of blood, but not the uprising per se.